The stars were quiet as the ship moved slowly through the black sky with lights blinking and engines humming like a gentle song in the night, and inside that ship stood a man named Jace Kellen, who was not just any man, but a brave, human soldier, with fire in his eyes and a restless heart that longed for more than war or duty or glory. Jace looked out the window and saw the blue and silver planet below him, and he knew its name well, for it was Velkara, a place wrapped in mystery and covered by strict laws and ancient fears, and even though it looked peaceful from above, every human knew what the rules said, and those rules were very clear. No human was to land on Velkara without special reason, no human was to walk alone in the royal gardens, and no human was ever allowed to look upon the face of the Saranthari princess. No one really knew why, and no one dared to ask. The Saranthari were not like humans. They were taller, with glowing skin that shimmered like light over water, and their voices carried music in every word, and their eyes could hold silence for a long time, and tell stories without sound. They lived by rules older than Earth itself, and their customs were written in stone and blood, and the greatest law of all was this: no outsider shall ever bond with the royal blood, and no one shall look upon the face of the veiled princess. It was said that she had never shown her face to anyone beyond her own kind, and even many Saranthari had never seen it, and she wore silver veils woven with threads of light and gold that covered her head and face, and she spoke only through messengers. She lived in a part of the palace that no one entered, and no humans had ever stepped beyond the outer halls. They said her gaze could break the mind and steal the soul, and bring shame to those who dared look. They said her beauty could start wars, or end them, and so it must stay hidden forever. Jace had read all of this in his mission file, and he had heard the stories, too, and the warnings and the threats, but he had also seen fear, dressed as wisdom, and silence used to hide something deeper. His orders were simple: bring a message of peace from Earth, and sit in meetings and say the right words, and leave with a handshake and a smile. But Jace did not like doing only what he was told. He believed that truth was often buried under layers of fear, and fear was the weapon of those who had something to hide. When his ship landed, and the palace guards met him with soft words and strong eyes, he smiled and bowed, but inside he was already wondering where the walls ended and where the forbidden halls began. He was led through shining halls, filled with light, and tall windows, and strange art that moved slowly, like smoke, and in every room he saw faces that looked calm and distant, but none of them were hers. No one spoke her name, not even once. They said the princess is safe, the princess is resting, the princess sends her blessings, but never her name, and never her voice. That night, as he stood on a high balcony, he looked at the stars again, and wondered what kind of life hides behind a veil for so long, and what truth could be so terrible that it must never be seen. He thought about Earth, and how humans once feared things they did not understand, and how many great changes came only when someone dared to ask the forbidden question. Jace did not want to break laws for no reason, and he did not want to cause harm. But his heart told him that something was not right. A face should not be a crime, and a voice should not be a threat, and a bond made in truth should not be forbidden. He closed his eyes and listened to the soft winds rising from the gardens below, where the moonlight touched the leaves with silver, and where shadows moved slowly, like whispers in a dream somewhere. Down there, past the gates and the guards and the walls, was the one person no human had seen, and no one dared to know. The princess behind the veil. Jace felt the weight of the silence around her like a chain made from old fear and old lies, and he made a quiet promise to himself as the stars blinked above. He would not turn away from the truth, even if it was hidden behind the oldest law in the galaxy, and if he was meant to meet her one day, he would not look away, he would not fear a face, he would not run from a soulbee, cause sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is not fight. But Cian Jace Kellen had come to Velkara to see what no one else would dare. The garden was not marked on any map, and it was not shown during the tour, and no one spoke of it during the long welcome meetings, but Jace found it anyway, guided by something quiet and strong inside him, like a voice without sound, calling him past the safe paths and polished halls. The sky was soft with fading light, and the trees of Velkara stood tall and wide, their leaves like glass bending with every breeze, making music in the air, and beneath them flowers opened, slowly glowing blue and white and gold as if breathing in the night. Jace walked slowly, his boots silent on the smooth stone path, and his eyes sharp, watching every movement, every shadow. But there was nothing to fear here, only peace, only silence, only the feeling that he was not supposed to be errand. Yet he did not turn back. His heart beat steady, but hard, like it knew something was about to happen, and it wanted to be ready. Then he heard Ita sound so soft he almost missed it, like wind touching water, like fingers On strings like sadness, made into music he followed it step by step, past the thick vines and tall trees, and into a circle of light, where the moon touched the ground, and in the middle of that light sat a figure wrapped in silver and stillness. She did not move when he stepped closer, and she did not speak. She sat on a stone bench beside a small pool, her hands resting on a strange curved instrument made of crystal and metal, and her head was bowed. Her face was hidden behind thin veils that shimmered with every breath, and her hair flowed like dark silk behind her shoulders. Jace did not need to ask who she was, he knew this was the one the others feared, the one the law protected, the one no human had ever been allowed to see. This was the princess. He froze, not from fear, but from wonder, because the moment felt too big, too sharp, too real, like stepping into a story told around fires in the deep cold of space. She looked up, but only a little, her face still hidden, and her voice gentle, like the wind through leaves. "Why are you here?" she asked. Took a breath and stepped closer, not too close, just enough to let her know he was not afraid. "I was walking," he said, "and I heard music and I followed it, and now I am here." She tilted her head, and the veils moved slightly, catching the moonlight. "You should not be here," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I know," said Jace, "but I am not here to cause harm." There was silence then, the kind that feels heavy and full, and it stretched between them, like a bridge waiting to be crossed. She turned back to her instrument, and played a few notes soft and slow, then stepped up to you. "Do not speak like the others," she said. "I am not like the others," said Jacesh. Did not reply. He looked around the garden, at the trees, at the glowing plants, at the water that reflected the stars above. "This place is beautiful," he said. "It is a prison," she said. He looked at her again, and saw how her hands rested, too still, too careful, like someone who had learned not to move too much, not to hope too much. "Who made it a prison?" he asked. "My people," she said, "and your people, and the law, and the fear they all carry like a shield. They do not want anyone to see what I am." "What are you?" he asked. "I do not know," she said, her voice a little lower. "I only know what they tell me, and what they hide from me, and what they expect me to be." Jace stepped closer again, not to break a rule, but to break a distance, a silence, a wall built by others. "You are not alone," he said, and his voice was quiet but strong. "You are not just what they say you are." She turned her head slightly, and he thought maybe, just maybe, she was looking at him behind those veils. "You should go," she said. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "I do not know," she said. Jace nodded and turned to leave, but as he stepped back into the shadows, he heard the music start again, and this time it was not sad. It was soft, yes, but it carried something else, something warmer, like a question, or a promise, or a beginning. He walked back to his room in silence, not sure what had just happened, but knowing something had changed. He had met the princess, she had spoken to him, and now nothing would ever be the same again. Morning on Velkara came without sound, as if the sun had agreed not to wake the sky too loudly, and the air was cool and still and soft like a whisper under silk. And in the quiet halls of the royal palace, Jace walked alone, thinking of the night before, the garden, the music, and the veiled woman who sat in silence and spoke with a voice both calm and heavy. He had not told anyone where he had gone, and no one had asked. And yet, when he returned to his guest chamber, there was a message waiting on the table, a simple line carved into crystal. "The council requests your presence at once now." He stood at the end of a long golden hallway, facing two guards dressed in dark robes, their eyes cold and unreadable, as they pushed open tall doors that groaned like tired mountains. Inside the chamber, everything was light and shadow, sharp lines and floating shapes, walls that shimmered with strange writing, and chairs that curved like living vines. And in the center stood the council. There were 5 of them, 3 Serenthari elders, 1 royal advisor, and 1 human ambassador from Earth, all dressed in ceremonial colors, with faces like stone and voices that sounded like thunder behind curtains. "Commander Kellen," said the elder in the middle, "you are here because your steps were not hidden." The others watched him with narrow eyes, waiting for a word, a slip, a truth he did not yet know. "I do not understand," he said, though part of him already did. "You went into the inner garden," said the advisor, "a place where your kind are not allowed." Jace did not answer. "Spoke to the one who should not speak to you," said the elder, "and you stood before a truth you were not meant to see still." He said nothing, because silence now was a shield and a weapon. "Both the princess is not for you," said the human ambassador, his voice quiet and tired, like someone repeating a warning he had given too many times. "She is part of a legacy that does not belong to Earth. We protect her for good reason," said the second Elderon. "What reason is that?" asked Jace, his voice calm but strong. The council exchanged glances, and then the first elder spoke again. "Long ago, before the treaty, before the peace, before the laws, a human tried to bond with royal blood. He looked upon Her face and his mind broke. He fell into madness and died without words. Without Nemeus frowned, but said nothing. After that we made the law, said the advisor, and we wrapped her in veils and silence, and kept her far from the world because of one story, said Jace Beckers. Of one truth, said the elder. That showed us how fragile your kind can be, and how dangerous ours may become. He stepped forward one pace, not two. Bold but not afraid, and he looked at each face in turn. What if she is more than your fear? What if your silence is the thing that brings danger? Not her voice, not her face. You speak without knowing, said the elder then. Let me know, said Jaslet. Me speak with her truly. Let me see her not with force, not with pride, but with purpose. Chamber grew colder, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. You asked for the forbidden, said the ambassador. Ask for what is right, said Jesseth elder. Stepped forward now, his voice sharper. Do not forget who you are. Human, you are a guest, and a soldier and a visitor in our world. Do not pretend you are a Saviorgus. Looked at him and nodded slowly. Do not come to save. I come to understand, and if that is too dangerous, then maybe the danger is not mine. There was silence, then long and thick. Finally, the advisor spoke again, his tone lower than before. You will not be punished for now, but if you seek the princess again, if you go to that garden, or speak her name, or try to lift the veil, then the treaty is broken, and your mission ends. In change Jace bowed slightly, but inside his heart was a storm, not of anger, but of fire, because now he knew they were afraid not of him, not even of her, but of what would happen if the truth was ever free. He walked out of the chamber without another word, and the doors closed behind him, like a warning wrapped in gold. Later that night in his room, he sat by the window and looked out at the stars and thought of her. Again her voice, her stillness, her words. It is a prison, she had said, and now he understood why they feared the bond. They feared what it would change, and deep inside Jace Kellen knew he would not turn away, not now, not ever, because some laws are made to protect, but others are made to control, and only the brave can tell the difference. The next day came with quiet steps and soft light, as if the sky itself feared to stir the still air, and Jace sat alone in the empty hall of his chamber, thinking about the words spoken in the council room, and the warning pressed into every syllable. Like ice under fire, he should have stayed away from the garden, and he should have followed the law, and he should have let her remain a shadow behind silver threads, but the truth was already alive in him, and truth once awakened does not return to sleep. So when the night returned wrapped in silver clouds and starlight, Jace left his chamber and walked once more through the palace, following the same path, past guards who looked but did not stop him, past doors that whispered but did not speak, and past memories still fresh from the night before. He stepped into the garden again, where the trees held their breath, and the moon poured its quiet song over every leaf and branch and stone. And she was there just as before, sitting by the pool, her instrument resting on her lap, and her veil shining like water under stars. You came back, she said, without turning. Yes, he answered, because I had to. They warned you, and still you are here. Still I am here. She turned slightly, but kept her face hidden as always, her hands folded, her voice calm like still wind over a lake. You should not be here then. Why are you here? He asked. She paused, as if the answer was a door she had never opened before. Because this is the only place where I can breathe, she said, the only place where I am not watched by eyes that want to shape me, or silence. Mijachi sat on the ground a few steps away, where he could see her reflection in the water, not her face, but the way her body moved, like someone always waiting to be caught. Tell me your name, he said. No, she answered quickly, not yet, not until I know who you are. I am Jasathet is a name, but not a soul. Then let me speak, and maybe you will hear my soul in the words. She did not move and did not reply, so he began to told her about Earth, not the cities or the machines or the ships, but the small things. The rivers that sang through green hills, and the wind that carried the smell of rain, and the laughter of children chasing light across open fields. He told her about his mother who sang to the stars when she missed his father, and about his brother who carved music into wood with hands that never shook, and about how he always believed that every wall had a door, even if no one else could see it. She listened without speaking, and her body softened, as if the weight she carried had shifted slightly. When he finished, she reached down beside her and lifted a small object wrapped in silk, and tossed it gently toward him, and he caught it in both hands. It was a charm carved from crystal, in the shape of a flower, and it pulsed faintly with soft blue light. What is this? He asked. Te reply, she said. To what? To your stories, to your truth, to your soul. He held it for a long moment, then looked up. Why do you wear the veil? She hesitated, and the silence was different now, deeper, because they fear what I carry inside, she said, not my face, not my eyes, not my words, but something older, something deeper, something even. I do not understand what you carry. I can feel what others feel, and they can feel what I feel. If they look into my eyes, it is like opening a door between two hearts, and it cannot be closed once it begins. Jace felt the air grow still around them, and that is why they hide us, because truth can break what fear protects, and they built this world on fear. But what if someone saw you and did not fear? Then everything would change, she said. That's so terrible to them. Yes, to me, I do not know. I have never been seen. He stood slowly, not walking closer, but standing taller. Let me see you then. No, she said quickly, too quickly. Not yet, maybe not ever. Why? Not because I am not ready, and maybe you are not ready either. Then let me wait until you are. She said nothing, but her hands gripped the instrument tighter, and for the first time he saw them tremble, just a little. He stepped back to leave, but turned once more. I will not stop coming here, unless you ask me to. She did not ask him to, and the music returned once more as he walked away, soft and quiet and filled with a question not of who she was, but of what they might become. The days passed like whispers in a dream, and each night Jace returned to the garden, like a shadow following the sound of something only the heart could hear, and each time the princess waited in the same place by the quiet pool with her instrument resting in her hands and the silver veil hiding the face the stars were never allowed to touch. He brought stories, not grand ones of war or battle, but soft ones of rivers and laughter and colors that lived in sunsets, and she listened without reply. Most nights, though, sometimes she left small gifts: a carved stone, a folded leaf that shimmered with golden dust, a word drawn into the ground with the edge of her finger, only to vanish in the morning. Dudras never asked her to lift the veil again, though he wondered more with every visit what lay behind it, not because of fear or curiosity, but because something within him felt incomplete when he spoke and could not see the one who listened. One night the wind changed, and the garden felt different, the air full of something sharp and waiting, like the pause before lightning strikes, and as Jace stepped into the light beneath the trees, he saw the princess was not alone within herself. She stood and waited, and when she spoke, her voice was not calm but full of fire, quiet fire, but fire still. I need to tell you what they fear, she said, what they hide, what they buried under the veil, and the law, and the silence. He stepped closer, but not too close, and nodded, though he said nothing. I was born during a red eclipse, a time the Serenthari call cursed and holy both, and the sky that night was torn open with light that danced and bled, and fell to the ground like tears. And when I opened my eyes, the healers gasped, and the priests stepped back, saw in my eyes something old, not just the gift, but something deeper. I do not just feel emotions. I mirror them, and I reflect them, and I return them stronger, so when one looks into my eyes, they feel what I feel, and I feel what they feel, and the line between us disappears. When I was a child, they let me walk among the others once, and only once, and I smiled at a boy who had stolen food, and he burst into tears, and confessed everything. They said I was dangerous, they said my eyes were truth, and truth is not always safe, so they placed the veil on me, and said it was for my protection and the world's. Jace listened with his hands clenched at his sides, not in anger, but in sorrow. You are not a danger, he said. You are a mirror, and maybe a mirror is what the world needs. The council fears change. She said they fear that if I bond with another being, especially a human, that fear will break and the world they built will fall. What is bonding to your people? He asked. It is not like a contract or a promise. It is a joining of minds and hearts, a link that cannot be broken once formed. It is rare and powerful, and only done with great truth. Stunned, it happens through the ice, through the soul in the ice. Jace stepped closer, and the air between them felt warmer now, not sharp, not heavy, but like something beginning to wake. What would happen if we bonded? He asked. She paused, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Then you would feel what I feel. You would carry my fear and my joy, and I would carry yours, and neither of us would be alone again, but we would never be able to lie, not to each other, not to ourselves. What if the council knew? Then they would stop it by any means. Even war, even worse than war, they would silence me forever, and he would be marked as a breaker of law, and hunted through the stars. Then we cannot bond, said Jasonot. Yet not. Yet she stepped back, and the veil moved with her like mist around fire, and she raised a hand and touched her chest where her heart beat, slow and steady. But I do not want to live behind this forever, she said. I want to be me. Want someone to see me, and not flinch, not fear, not fall. Then when you are ready, said Jace, I will be here. She reached out and placed something in his hand, a ring carved from pale stone with a symbol. He did not know. When the time comes, this will guide you, she said. He looked at it, then looked at her. Though he still could not see the face behind the veil, he could feel the weight of her truth, pressing Through the space between them, the secret was no longer hidden, and Jace knew now that everything had changed. Not just between them, but across the stars asterisk. The night sky burned with flashes of red as alarms echoed through the palace like cries from the bones of the planet, and Jace ran through the stone corridors with his breath sharp in his chest, and his heart pulling him toward the garden, where she always waited hidden in silver, and silence guards moved in every direction, their voices urgent, their hands ready for battle, but no one saw him slip into the shadows, no one saw him leave the path laid for diplomats and vanish into the wild edges of the royal grounds. The garden was no longer quiet, the wind moved like a storm in hiding, and the trees trembled, as if they could feel the fear growing in the soil, and under the moonlight the soft pool rippled with broken light, and there she stood. Alone, her back to him, her veil fluttering like wings trapped in a cage. Alira, he said, calling her name for the first time, the name she had never spoken, but had once left carved in the soil beneath his feet. When she thought he was not watching, she turned, and he saw that her hands were shaking, not from weakness, but from choice, because she had not run, not hidden, not locked herself away. They are coming for me, she said. They fear that you and I will change everything, and they are not wrong. He stepped closer until he could hear her breath above the wind, and see the shimmer of fear mixed with fire in her stance. Then, let us change it, he said. You know what must happen, she said, her voice softer now, almost like it was afraid to be heard by the Triceus. He said, if we bond, there is no turning back, she said. They will know, they will feel it across the palace, through the walls and into the stars. They will know I do not care. He said, you should maybe, but I do not. She paused, her fingers lifting the veil an inch, not to reveal her face, but to feel the ire. I have never shown myself to anyone, not even to my own people, not fully, not without fear. I will not fear you, he said. You might once you see what I carry once. Your heart is open, and your pain becomes mine, and mine becomes yours. Then let it be so, he said. She stepped forward, and the world seemed to pause. The wind slowed, the pool stilled, the stars blinked in rhythm, and the garden held its breath. She raised both hands to the veil, and looked at him, though he still could not see her eyes. Not yet, her. You sure? She asked. Yes, then, do not close your eyes. She pulled back the veil, and for the first time, he saw her not a monster, not a goddess, not a danger, but a soul born from light and shadow, and truth. Her eyes deep with sorrow and hope, and stars. The moment their eyes met, the bond began like fire that did not burn, like ice that did not freeze, like music that spoke in colors he had never seen. He felt her pain, the endless silence, the longing, the fear, and she felt his, the war, the weight of duty, the ache of always walking alone there. Hearts opened like doors, and something ancient stepped through, not a god, not a ghost, but something living and real, and he fell to his knees, not from pain, but from the flood of emotion. So wide and deep it filled every corner of his being, and she reached out and held his face in both hands, and together they stood in the middle of the garden, no longer strangers, no longer hidden, no longer afraid. The sky pulsed above them, and faraway alarms stopped ringing, as if the world itself had heard the bond and bowed its head. But the moment did not last. Voices rose in the trees, guards shouting, elders screaming orders, and heavy boots breaking the silence. Once more, they are coming, she said. Let them come. He said, we cannot fight them, she said. No, but we can stand, we can speak, and we can show them what they fear, truth. They cannot break what we have done, she said. No, he said, because now we are not two voices, we are one. They turned to face the coming wave together, hand in hand, heart in heart. And in that garden, the old world cracked, and the new one began to breathe. Jace knew what would come next, the trial, the judgment. The eyes of 1,000 leaders staring down at him, but he also knew that he had seen her, and in seeing her, he had found something worth more than peace, worth more than law, worth more than safety. He had found her hand. He would not let her go. The great chamber of judgment stood tall like a mountain carved from crystal and time, its ceiling lost in shadows, its walls alive with light that moved and pulsed with ancient energy, and in the center of the chamber stood Jace, Kellen, alone before the council, before the elders, before the galaxy above him, floated the image of what had been seen in the garden. The moment the bond was made, the moment truth shattered, the old silence and the law broke like thin glass in a storm all around him. Saranthari leaders sat unmoving like statues carved from fear and pride, and behind them stood envoys from Earth, from other worlds, from the treaty powers, all with their eyes fixed on the human who had dared. A voice rang out from the high platform, the voice of the first elder, sharp and cold like winter air cutting through skin. You defied the oldest law. Yes, Jace said, his voice steady. Made contact with royal blood without consent from the council. She gave consent, he said, and she is not a prisoner to your laws. You bonded with her. You looked into her eyes, and now the link cannot be undone. It was not meant to be undone, Jace said. The human ambassador stepped forward, his eyes dark with worry, not anger but fear for what might follow. Jace, you must understand what this means. They will say Earth has broken the treaty. They will say this was an act of invasion, not of love then. Let them say it, Jace said. If they fear truth more than war, then they never wanted peace, only controlled the chamber. Filled with whispers that echoed like rain falling on stony Alira, entered the chamber. Then not hidden, not veiled, but radiant, her face uncovered her eyes. Bright with the power of feeling and the weight of history, and every voice fell silent as she walked to Jace and stood beside him, not behind, not beneath, but beside. She looked up at the council, and her voice when it came was not loud, but it carried into every corner of the chamber. You taught me to hide, and to fear, and to bow to silence. You said my gift was dangerous, that my truth would destroy us, but I have looked into the heart of a human, and I have seen courage, not cruelty, and now I have bonded, and I will not be unbowed. Council did not speak right away, and when they did, it was not with fury, but with hesitation. You have broken what was meant to protect you, they said. You only ever protected yourselves, she answered, and in doing so you have kept your people blind to what could be. Low voice rose from the far end of the chamber. It was an elder long silent who had once helped write the law that bound her, the one who remembered the last bond, the one that ended in death. Perhaps it is not the bond we should fear, but the reason we fear it, he said. A murmur of agreement followed, soft at first, then stronger. The council spoke again, their voices slower, less sharp. What would you have us do? Then Alira stepped forward, her eyes shining in the veil end. The silence teach our people that the mind can grow stronger when it shares its pain, not weaker, and let the bond be a bridge, not a threat. And if the bond causes harm, the elder asked, then guide it, do not chain it. Joes turned and looked at the room filled with leaders and watchers. We are not asking for power, we are asking for understanding. There was silence again, and then something shifted. A ripple, like warmth through ice. The council stood, and one by one, the elders removed the small silver emblems from their robes and placed them on the platform. The old law is broken, they said, and from its end, a new path will rise. The chamber doors opened, and the people of Velkara gathered outside, saw their princess standing free, saw the human who had seen her, and lived, and loved, and changed, and they bowed, not out of fear, not out of duty, but out of hope. Jace and Alira walked forward, hand in hand, as the first light of dawn broke through the crystal walls. And for the first time in many lifetimes, the air felt clean. There were still questions, still doubts, still voices who would resist, but the bond had been made, and it could not be unmade, and across the stars others would hear the story, and wonder, and maybe even believe that truth is not the enemy, that love is not weakness, that seeing each other is the first step to becoming more. And in that moment, as the sun rose on Velkara, and the stars faded from the sky, a legacy began, not written in stone or silence or fear, but in two hearts bound across worlds.